Early in the year, 2020 was looking like a busy year for theater. In New York City, Music Man, starring Hugh Jackman, was slated to open up in the summer. Up-and-comers like Moulin Rouge and Six were looking to be successes at this year's Tony Awards, and established successes like The Lion King, Wicked, Hamilton, and so on continued to please audiences and shareholders alike. That's not even mentioning the thriving touring scene introducing new shows into the rotation. However, none of that happened, at least not on schedule. March 2020 saw the widespread of COVID-19 in the United States, effectively shutting down the country for the better part of the year. Practically every aspect of daily life was affected to some degree. Schools moved to remote learning, restaurants closed their dining rooms, movies left theaters in favor of direct-to-streaming releases, and on March 12, 2020, by order of Governor Cuomo, Broadway went dark, with regional theaters following suit not too long after across the country, effectively shutting down live theater in the United States. But the theater scene lived on, just not in person. Through the efforts of local, collegiate, and professional theaters, 2020 saw a series of digital performances that allowed the show to go on, so to speak. Let's go over a quick timeline of events. In January 2020, the first confirmed case of novel coronavirus 2019 appeared in the US after the initial outbreak in Wuhan, China the month before. Through the end of January and into February, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention tracked the spread of the disease.
The decision about whether or not to declare a public health emergency of international concern is one I take extremely seriously.
February 26. Incident Manager for the CDC, Dr. Nancy Messonnier, gives a statement saying the disruption to everyday life may be severe. Fast forward to March 11th. The World Health Organization officially declares COVID-19 a pandemic. 2 days later, then President Trump declares an international emergency. 2 days after that, New York City is shut down. I think the rest speaks for itself from there. By the end of March, the United States was basically shut down. Schools were going remote.
I saw it as like a longer break at first, until eventually we started doing Zoom classes. That was when I realized, okay, this might be serious.
Man, it was rough. I mean, it was really weird too. So we didn't really know the severity of it all, and it was hard because it was just kind of out of nowhere. They're just like, hey, by the way, like we're gonna have 2 weeks and then we'll reassess, and then even before those 2 weeks were even up, they said we're not coming back.
And of course, theaters were shut down.
Well, then by Tuesday, the NBA had canceled its season, and then Broadway shut down. And I said, this is real.
For touring productions, both artists and venues struggled. In College Station, A&M University is home to Opus, the Opera and Performing Arts Society. Executive Director Anne Black had to scrap a planned-out season due to the virus.
Very little touring was happening anyway. None of Broadway was touring that next year.
Performances were pushed back weeks, then months, then entire years, with an entire industry trying to stay afloat. Even shows born and bred on the internet, like long-running podcast Welcome to Night Vale, found themselves in a tough spot. Meg Bashwinner, tour manager for the production, explained that touring was the lifeblood of the show, and without that in the picture, their group of artists found themselves struggling.
We kept pushing. I moved those dates so many times.
Like Night Vale is an independent podcast network. We don't have the backing of a iHeartRadio or Spotify or Amazon. Like we'd have no VC money. We're just us. So it's increasingly difficult in this environment without big corporate backing to do anything.
Going dark is an expensive prospect for the industry. There's no money coming in, but companies still need to pay to keep facilities, pay actors and crew members, and so on. In a 2020 article for The Guardian, the artistic director for the National Theatre in England, Rufus Norris, said his program was hemorrhaging money and was concerned smaller companies would not survive the costs needed to maintain and keep their facilities during lockdown. Meanwhile, colleges like my alma mater of Texas Lutheran University made the decision to suspend their seasons for the spring semester, hoping to return to in-person shows by the fall.
It was a real disappointment early on. The rest of the spring of 2020 included a lot of scheduled student productions. And so we had 2 full-length student productions that had to be canceled, one of which was only a week away from opening when we went into quarantine. Our program always has a bunch of shorter student-directed projects in April as well. So probably all told, there might have been 20 to 25 projects that had to be canceled as a result.
In the uncertainty that was the year 2020, many people turned to art for comfort. Movies, TV, music, games. Not only were people returning to something familiar, people were creating and taking their art to the digital world. The internet has been a significant part of sharing art for years and years at this point. From amateur videos on YouTube to independent online marketplaces supporting small artists to major streaming original releases. And theater is no stranger to that. While 2020 is arguably when it thrived, digital theater has been around for years. Take, for example, the Metropolitan Opera. They've partnered with movie theaters for years prior to the pandemic to bring pre-recorded shows to a national audience. PBS has also shown professional musicals as a part of the Live from the Lincoln Center series. Even overseas, the National Theater provides options to purchase recordings of their shows.
What Americans have to realize is that we're kind of behind. There are countries that have done this better and longer than us. The National Theatre in England has been capturing their productions with multi-camera filming and distribution for quite a while now, and they've got it down to a science.
Texas Lutheran was in a unique position to tackle the digital option compared to other companies.
Given the thrust of our program, which tries to blend theater and film and new media studies, it was really important that we do that. So we adapted pretty quickly, and we already had some gear that we could use for that stuff. We had students that had already been taking some of that in their curriculum. So it didn't feel like that harsh of a pivot for us. We didn't spend a whole lot of time worrying about that. We just said, okay, how are we going to adapt to this, and what kind of tools do we use?
And more than that, the students I spoke to expressed excitement over the artistic possibilities offered by blending the live and the remote aspects of theater.
I think people are really going to want to be experimental with stuff, especially since we're going to be in a time where we don't really know what's going to happen anymore. The pandemic really reminded us that we have no clue what the future holds. We are dramatic media after all. We're trying to expand our horizons and new formats and everything, so it would be very, very cool to see different kinds of stuff that people hadn't really thought of before when it comes to thinking about college theater.
One of the ways they tackled going digital early on was through a reinvention of the radio play. Audio productions can be seen as a forerunner to this current era of digital theater. From radio plays back in the 20th century to audiobooks with full cast productions to the more modern era of podcasting, there's always been a way to tell a story without needing to be physically present, and a way to distribute that in a wide format. Going back to Welcome to Night Vale, as a show that exists in a primarily digital format, it's a perfect example. On top of offering the usual audio episodes in a free feed, they also sell recordings of their live shows once that script has been retired from touring.
For a number of reasons, not everyone can get out to see these shows. And while they are different, it's still a community, it's still the actors performing live for you. And sometimes we're not in your city, we're never going to get to your city. Sometimes we're in your city and the show is not accessible to you because of physical reasons, because of financial reasons. So getting to access a wider audience, I think that was great.
On an economic front, offering digital reproductions of shows is a great way to build an audience, as it removes the physical barrier to entry, can accommodate those with hearing or sight disabilities through captioning or audio description tracks, and can even offer more pricing flexibility than a physical venue.
There's some strong opinions about theater and what we should be doing to help democratize and provide access to the content. The risk here and challenge is always that it gets really messy. There's a lot of publishing layers involved. There's a lot of intellectual property involved. And of course, at the professional level, you've got to figure out the revenue structure for anybody who's involved in a project.
When it comes to official filmed recordings of theatrical productions, there are two main categories, archival and pro shots. Archivals are, as the name might imply, intended as archives, a proof of existence kind of recording. They're typically filmed as static wide shots and aren't intended for public consumption, instead going into an archive. Archives like these can be found in some college theater programs, as well as on the professional level in the New York Public Library's Theater on Film and Tape Archive that houses performances from Broadway, off-Broadway, and regional theater. However, it's only open to locals and researchers, not for the public, much like the collections held by the aforementioned universities. So what would your average theater-loving audience look to for a recorded performance? A professionally shot show. There's been plenty of examples through the years, but if you've watched any professionally shot musical, it's definitely...
I did watch Hamilton.
Hamilton.
There was the Hamilton one. I think everybody during the pandemic was like, Hamilton.
Hamilton released on Disney Plus in July 2020. Since its debut on Broadway back in 2015, it's been an absolute box office juggernaut, bringing in millions week after week in New York, managing multiple touring companies, and more. So a professionally shot version was inevitable, planned as far back as 2016. While Disney doesn't make its streaming numbers publicly available, the services saw a drastic increase in traffic, downloads, and subscriptions on the film's debut weekend, and became the most viewed thing on the platform that month.
We've seen the influence of streaming television. We know that the audiences that we'd love to appeal to are at home on the couch watching Netflix and chilling. And so how do we get those folks to pay attention? We have to continue to do quality live events, but if we can find a way to economically get it into new distribution channels, then I think that's what we have to do.
So needless to say, the audience is there. So why don't we have more professionally shot theater? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, the money side of things. Not only are pro shots expensive to make, there's also a fear of loss of revenue from rights holders. After all, if there's a readily available version of a show on a streaming service, wouldn't people see it as a good enough substitute and watch that instead of shelling out for a ticket to see it live? Additionally, there's a matter of unions. Most Broadway productions are carried out under a variety of unions to ensure people both on stage and off are treated fairly. However, if one of these shows were to be filmed for a wide release, then film unions would have to get involved. Now productions have to navigate the complex contractual agreements for rehearsal arrangements, filming and broadcast agreements, and not to mention negotiations for home distribution if the producers want to go that far. Needless to say, things get complex fast when cameras enter the stage. That's not to say there's no sustainability for digital theater, but it can be difficult, and not everyone's a fan.
Everything else we did felt like we were watching TV, and that's really not what we do.
On the student side of things, while digital theater gave the option of continuing to grow their skill sets, actually executing on those skills weren't always easy.
Really sad to me because I came here for in-person experience and to get to know my classmates, because that's what our business is networking and constantly collabing with each other, and to have that kind of taken away just out of nowhere, it was hard to deal with.
It was rough for me. I'm someone who's neurodivergent, so not having that hands-on curriculum anymore really messed with me, because I'm a very hands-on person. I don't like being lectured without at least having that component of actually putting it into practice.
Even when students were able to perform live again, the uneasy transitionary period of reopening under pandemic restrictions was an obstacle for many.
Interesting, especially because I had to act with a mask on.
I found myself as an actor working less because I kind of got used to people not seeing the lower half of my face.
It was really hard because you had to kind of find a new way to act.
We had to act with the mask on, which was a little like it kind of held us back because we couldn't emote, and the voices we did with our characters, they kind of got blocked with the mask until we got permission to do it without the mask, and a lot of us agreed that it was very freeing as an actor to act with the mask on.
The return to live performances was also difficult for professional crews, especially here in Texas.
The challenge was on the other side with the COVID protocols that the company required for all of the touring stuff, masking, proof of vaccination, all of those things that we couldn't mandate.
Our booking agent was like, this is what's happening. This is the new normal. There's not going to be if COVID's over, everything's back open again. That's not going to happen. So we have we have to go out and do it and just try our best to keep our audience safe and to keep ourselves safe.
While digital options kept the industry afloat, most will tell you it's just not the same.
Honestly, virtual was just not it for me.
It can be done well. If it's done well, like I saw some shows that it's just a play that you're watching on screen, which it's like watching one of those little slide tutorials of like Hamilton or Wicked. It's fine. I'm glad that it's here, but I'd rather see it in person.
But in 2020, as lockdowns continued past summer, stretching into fall and winter, the question was asked, when will we want to be in a room full of strangers again? In the years since the pandemic started, the amount of digitally available performances has only grown. Even with venues reopening, we've seen more and more professionally shot shows, even beyond Broadway. Taylor Swift and Beyoncé have announced theatrical versions of their sold-out 2023 tours, with both concert films looking to be box office smashes. But let's face it, not everyone is a Taylor Swift or a Beyoncé level star. And with the growing digital theater market, you don't have to be.
But it was fun to share with a digital audience and learning Vimeo-based distribution or YouTube-based distribution. And I think given the thrust of our program, which tries to blend theater and film and new media studies, it was really important that we do that.
Quoting from Maylee Bridges' scholarly perspectives on COVID-19, quote, "To create a new form of theater, one must reconsider what defines the work itself. For example, many think of theater as a space for live performance, but the notion of liveness does not dictate the thing itself. It's how you experience it. While the digital option is helpful for shutdowns like in 2020, it's not always the best option."
I would always like that to be an option, just for like the distance thing. But as for solely relying on virtual, I wouldn't recommend it.
Any theater fan will tell you there is nothing that can replicate the live experience.
We're here in line for 6. You excited? Yes.
There's just so much like eagerness to interact with people again, to talk with people, to share stories, to do all that. And that's like really exciting.
Because I saw really thin audiences coming back for the first time. Like, is this the new normal? And it may still be. In the spring, it feels like we're rebounding a little bit and people are starting to come back.
This group, at least, I feel like there was that initial separation and figuring out how to function in the pandemic. But now once we got over that initial shock, it actually brought us closer.
If you can find silver linings and good things that come out of really awful things, the country has a better understanding of how vital the arts are.
Fingers crossed that we will all come back to enjoy the live communal stuff, but we have to work at it.
And while COVID has receded into waves that look to rise and fall with respiratory illness season,
I'm optimistic that we will never be back where we were in 2020.
if there's one thing I've personally taken away from the pandemic, it's that art will find a way to survive and even thrive. Distance doesn't have to be the end. The show will go on.